Hello and welcome to Digital Trust World 2021. My name is Alan Goode. I'm the CEO and Chief Analyst at Goode Intelligence, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Neil Costigan, CEO of BehavioSec. I'm talking with Neil today as we have recognized him as being a visionary in the field of biometrics. The Goode Intelligence Visionaries Award is recognition of outstanding and lasting impact in the digital trust industry. And we have awarded Neil the 2021 Biometric Visionary in recognition of innovation that he has personally brought to the industry and the lasting impact that he has brought through the development and adoption of behavioral biometrics as CEO of BehavioSec. As CEO of BehavioSec, Neil Costigan leads the company's work delivering innovative behavioral biometric technology, protecting consumer transactions, payments, and financial firms from fraud and theft. It's more than 25 years of entrepreneurial and technical leadership experience in venture-backed startups and global technology corporations spanning the US and the EU. A cryptographer by training, his career expanded to include software development, executive leaderships, and entrepreneurship. He holds an extensive portfolio of patents and serves as principal investigator at BehavioSec's US DoD DARPA projects. Prior to BehavioSec, Neil was VP for R&D at smart card manufacturer Gemalto and co-founder, CTO at PKI specialist Cello Communications. Neil holds a PhD for his thesis on elliptic curve cryptography on modern processor architectures and has developed a number of commercial security applications. He frequently presents on innovation, cryptography, and network security. I'm delighted that Neil has joined me today to officially receive this award and for Neil to walk us through his work in biometrics and to share with us his views on the latest innovation in biometrics. Neil, biometric technologies have had a fantastic journey with mainstream adoption over recent years. Tell us about your background and how you got into the world of biometrics.
Well, I've two entry points to biometrics, actually. I'm both curious. You mentioned and made me feel very, very old as you read out that my background there. But during my time at Gemalto, now Thales, I was running research and development in France. And Gemalto, Jean Bleu at the time, very innovative. Some of the stuff out of the labs inside our team were the first implementations of fingerprint matching, biometric fingerprint matching in the SIM cards. So one of the innovations that people went straight to when the cards moved into kind of multi-app cards was to do biometric profile matching on the cards, secure storage of the templates, etc. in the cards. So that was part of our group and our team. It was very much prototype stage then, would have been 2000, 2001. But that would have been my first exposure to biometrics and the relative complexity of implementation compared to some of the other stuff we did.
Yeah, no, I was at Schlumberger probably at the same time. So I was doing crypto card stuff on their cards. And yeah, it was obviously the issue with perhaps doing development in the SIM as well, is that you got a very small space.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
To do things. So you've got to be agile and efficient, I think is the word.
That's it. And you know, what we don't consider storage requirements and computation expense, you know, very much were, you know, the order of the day. It was just how much every bit, byte and memory and CPU clock cycle counted. And so I thought it was, you know, when we actually saw it in practice, it was incredible innovation and top of the line stuff. It would have been showcase from the R&D lab at the time. You know, this would have been to show the future, the vision, not just that we were making software and pushing products out to release in the next 3 months, but this is what we may see in 5 years' time. So that was my first impact. And interestingly enough, then it was after my time at Gemalto that I went to become a cryptographer and returned to the world of academia. So I packed my bags and went off to university after a 10-year spell at industry. And during that time, I was on secondment or on, you know, a time here at a university in Sweden. And I was asked to meet some undergraduates who were doing their third level undergrad project in the area. And they had the idea of the behavioral biometric. It kind of, you know, and they were sent to me going, hey, you've done this stuff before, maybe some tips and advice about what to do with this concept, this idea. And quickly I was, that's not a bad idea. And then it was really a case of how do you take that whiteboard, that concept, that prototype, which at the time actually was a kind of Unix shell, console typing thing. Well, how do we take this idea and innovate and make it commercially viable? And I think that's then what the next few years were, to take this concept and go, how would it work in the real world? And now that we're out to hundreds and hundreds of millions of people with the technology in their hands, it's been quite a journey. But that's the entry point. It was academia.
Yeah, but behavioural is an odd one in biometrics in a way, and for me as an analyst covering this area, it's sometimes quite difficult to categorize, because it's you're not creating a kind of a template where you can match against, like with face and iris, although face is changing in the way that we identify and verify people. So how do you make that? So
you're right, actually. So, and sometimes I go, the biometric is the wrong bucket for us, but I think there's more similarities than not with it. And I think also, back to the commercializing angle, the go-to-market is very similar. We are introducing kind of risk-based ideas, risk-based concepts, and selling and working in similar areas. So we would knock on the same doors, I think, as our friends from the physical biometrics in regard to deployment and some of the reasons and understanding and education and concepts behind and value add and reasons for the for the adoption. But it is a softer deployment. The fact that hardware is out of the picture means we've gone to bigger scale quicker. The interoperability of it and stuff like this is a different story. But it's always been the difficult cousin or child, I think, in the biometric family. But we've seen over the 10 years or so, or 12 years now, from an interesting byline in a biometrics paper saying, hey, and there's this idea, to going from a sentence to a paragraph to a page to nearly half of some of the papers nowadays you see, when one really gets down to the nitty gritty of deploying, particularly in the consumer space, the CIAM space, where we've had, ourselves and our peers, huge success in getting this stuff deployed because of the market need. Particularly as the device has changed and it's very much a 24/7 mobile world. In software, I think behavioral has had its time. It found its time and the perfect storm. Then.
Yep, totally agree with you. So, what do you feel is the most exciting innovation happening today in biometrics?
The most exciting thing for our industry, I think, is the actual seeing day by day now strong consumer authentication, SCA, in practice, not just in concept, not just hey, it's a requirement and wouldn't it be great if we all got there, but now noticing that every second time I'm doing a transaction that we're seeing the infrastructure behind it is in place, that I am genuinely seeing the pop-ups and the interface, and that's been required, and not just as a nice to have, but nearly everywhere. Where I'm based at the moment in the Nordics, there's been some level of SCA for quite a while now, and I think it's kind of moved more into that standardization kind of process where it's not that it's working every third time, it's actually there all the time, and it works, and it works seamlessly, and in behind it we see biometrics in some shape or form. It's a very early adopting market, so maybe I'm seeing that more and more, but I think it's very exciting that we're seeing it going beyond little silos of things into a huge infrastructure and use all the time, and passively and without any of the big concerns we all had about scalability and user confusion and education and privacy concerns, and all those things in practice are not really happening, and now it's ubiquitous. So that's pretty exciting. In our own area, the behavioral stuff, again, I think it's the widespread deployment in practice, but some of the things that people were concerned about aren't there. There was always this, well, how long does it take to train? And we were like, well, people had a rule of thumb of about 10 times, and in practice, maybe 20 times you saw somebody. So it was very much in that sphere of thinking. Now we're seeing 3 times. And not only that, right from the beginning, because of the behavioral there, a lot of features around bots and malware, about new account fraud happen as soon as you turn on the software. and then the account takeover part happening within 3 times of seeing a user, which I kind of went very skeptical when the guys started first touting this around from the lab, saying we think we've got some techniques that have really brought this through. Now seeing that in practice, and when we do deployments, and the value people are putting in software on a Friday, and by Monday we're hearing about, oh, we've caught fraud, or 80% of the users are on board it, and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool.
No, yeah, and I think it's the right moment, the kind of with the regulation you mentioned, the FPSC to SCA, obviously there, but with the need to try and reduce as much friction, the need to improve an experience, and how important that is now to consumers and citizens, because they don't want a cumbersome kind of process of identifying themselves. So it fits the regulation on the one hand, and then the kind of the need for frictionless kind of identification, authentication on the other. So yeah, I think it's the right moment, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the business now is that the technology was originally 10, 12 years ago. So in terms of looking at the future, what are your thoughts on trends for biometrics in the future?
Well, my thoughts first go to Bill Gates being asked to predict the future, and we'll never forget the fact that he said 640K was good enough for everybody. So putting me on the spot about a trend for security.
We won't come back to you, honestly.
No, actually, it's a little bit of what we're seeing in practice, and I think it'll explode out even further, is multi-factor and multimodal in practice, not just on the whiteboard or in PowerPoints. So quite, we've had the out-of-band authentication moved to two-factor authentication. Then people were obviously going for multi-factor. What needs to be done in the right circumstance? Not every time you're buying a cup of coffee did you need to, pull out the hardest MFA possible. You would analyze in real time. We're seeing that in practice. And and another thing, I felt people were doing two-factor and multi-factor from one vendor because it was easier. What I'm noticing now, and I think it'll be a big part of the future, is third-party factors, other factors, not necessarily from the same vendor, the same architecture, will fall into place, or falling into place, working seamlessly, interoperable, scalable, without reducing security, and giving that whole user experience that's appropriate. So I think actual multi-factor in practice, and it becoming ubiquitous, and also that we nearly forget how hard it was to deploy this stuff in the first place years ago, as it was when everybody kind of went, well, that's hard. Nowadays it's not. The software infrastructure, the education, the understanding of it, the maturity of a few of the products mean that multi-factor, I think, is a trend that's not going away. Yeah. Is that
because architecturally it's easy to plug things together or plug things in?
Yeah. I think so. I think somebody wants we all have open standards, but you're better off buying an open standard system from one vendor, because they have done all that work. Yeah. And there's always those little gotcha. And I think some companies, and I'm thinking Sun, then Oracle, worked on the back of that. But nowadays, I think software innovation around cloud, around horizontal deployments, the need for horizontal scaling rather than vertical scaling, because of the Moore's law's limitations or whatever, have meant that we've kind of got ourselves into a world where the web services, microservices, this kind of stuff, protocols, are open APIs are more common than not. Mm-hmm. And when we go to a new customer and say, here's our architecture, they go, well, we get that. It's already there. It's not a surprise. It's not an education. That's how it would be expected to be done. And we get integration, and we get scaling. Lots of things that used to be huge problems for every vendor just don't become issues anymore because of architectures. And I think that then lends itself into, how does the stuff work in practice? Well, people are not afraid of multi-vendor solutions, best of breed, being able to swap things in, swap things out. Those kind of things in practice. So multi-factor, I think, and then multimodal. It's surprisingly, it was conceptual, I think, where people were merging things like behavioral on top of a physical, doing different biometrics depending on the risk and the situation. So we're not kind of seeing a black and white. We're either a face or a fingerprint or a behavioral. I know of big rollouts where we have all three, kind of mainstream biometrics, I think, face, finger and behavioural all packaged in one systems, and that's not a surprise.
Yeah, I can definitely concur with that. Brilliant. So thanks, Neil, for joining us today, and congratulations on being the Good Intelligence 2021 Biometrics Visionary. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Cheers.